Okay. So, hello, everybody at Classical Archives. It's my pleasure to be speaking with Karim Sulayman about his absolutely terrific new pentatone record, I should say Grammy-nominated recording, Broken Branches. So, we're actually recording this the day before Thanksgiving. So, it's just really glad that he was able to make some time in his schedule to talk to us. So, I thought actually, I might start out by changing up the order of some of my questions because I think it might make sense if it's all right with you to start out by asking a little bit about your background and where you're from, where you studied, and kind of a background, if you could.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Chicago, and then I went to the Eastman School of Music for my undergrad, and then I took a year off, I think, and then I started my master's at Rice University in Houston, Texas, and then moved to New York and just tried to start piecing together some kind of career, uh, and here we are now. So.
Terrific. Are there musical people in your family before you, or are you a groundbreaker?
I think I'm the groundbreaker as far as music goes. We have some I have some artistic people in my extended family, like some visual artists, and my dad's father was a pretty prominent Lebanese philosopher and poet and political thinker. So there's like some literary mind there as well, but as far as music goes, no.
Okay. Do you have any observations about what it might mean to be a Lebanese American performing artist? If you don't, that's fine too. But
No, I mean, it's been a lot of what I've been focusing on lately, in programming. But I think that there aren't a lot of Middle Eastern, North African, um, classical musicians out there, Western classical musicians out there, and so that's sort of been something that's come to the forefront, I guess. I mean, I didn't think about it much, and now I sort of see it more. And I think that comes. I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but I think it comes with when I grew up, I sort of started like sort of seeing my otherness in a much more focused way, in a way that I think I didn't quite understand growing up. I believe it was there in retrospect. I definitely saw it, but the otherness in a sort of post 9/11 world definitely like came to focus, and it's just not often, especially in the West, a lot of people who flee war and who emigrate, don't see the arts as a sort of viable career. Like they want their kids to be solid and okay, and I think that it's like you hear like this sort of like stereotypical, you'll become a doctor or a lawyer, you have to make money, you have to have this fallback. mm. So I mean, that's definitely how I grew up. Even though my parents were very supportive of what I was doing, there was always a sort of pang of it might not work. And I think that comes from their own displacement and their own insecurity, right, of where they landed. And so you don't see a lot to go back to your question, sorry, that you don't see a lot of Arabs in classical music, and so when they do pop up, you kind of notice. And so I definitely have my pulse on who's out there, but there aren't a lot of us. And so I think just in and of itself alone in classical music, you kind of get put into another box as well, because there's so few.
out of curiosity, you have brothers and sisters, and
Yeah,
what have they
I have a
what
brother.
have they gone into? Is he an artist as well?
No, he's a lawyer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's artistic.
There you go. I guess so. I mean, there's some nuance there, I suppose.
Yeah, he's the only the only artistic lawyer practicing in the United States. So I wanted to loop back to your CD Broken Branches. Um, One of the statements that I read that might be from the liner notes says it explores the wood of the guitar and its relatives as well as the splintering of history known as the diaspora. It's a fascinating statement. What can you tell us about the evolution of the idea of broken branches?
Well, it stemmed from, I mean, my relationship with Sean, the guitarist, is a long one. It's a long-standing collaboration, and we knew that we wanted to make a recording eventually in our lives together. We we had worked very intensively on Britain's songs from the Chinese, and in in figuring out the program, it sort of became an arm of this other thing that I had done recently, which was to develop a production, basically a Baroque pasticcio around the Middle East and the Crusades, called Unholy Wars. And um, that, I mean, that's like very personal, right? And so I've always believed, and Sean believes this too, to make programming hit more and to make things more relevant, I think you have to come from an authentic place and have to layer on our own experiences onto previously existing material to make that material fresh and new, to make it unique in its interpretation, and to keep moving the needle forward in classical music, because I think that we are in this discussion of like, will classical music survive and is it relevant anymore? And I believe that it will survive. I believe that it is relevant, but I think that you, instead of treating things as museum pieces, you kind of have to look at where you are now as a human, and figure out how to create, new narratives around things, and make them yours, right? So we knew that, to get back to your question, sorry, I talk a lot, but
No, no,
to get back to to get
no,
back
you're
to your question.
answering my question.
Okay, but so we wanted sort of songs from the Chinese, obviously, to be included, and then we sort of looked at what are some of the problems with songs of the Chinese when you have an English composer title something songs from the Chinese in these kind of not great translations by a guy who had never been to China, who was kind of like an armchair Chinese scholar, like not even really. And so we can look at all of those things and sort of create something of Sean's Far Eastern ethnicity, my Middle Eastern ethnicity, and look at how Western classical music is influenced by the East, and demonstrate sort of like this constant borrowing of cultures and interchange of cultures, and how basically what we show is that the world is round and that borders aren't really, I mean, borders are kind of made up, and the power of looking at music through time and space in a more circular and cyclical way. That was our jumping off point.
So the two of you worked very much together then to come up with the selections that are on the disc.
Yeah, I mean, Sean definitely deferred a lot to me as far as like the vocal music itself, but we came up with the idea together, and we had, again, as I said, we had been thinking about this for a long time, and so I think it was really during the pandemic, when we all of us had time to kind of really pause for a second and really put our minds to projects that either we didn't have time before to really dedicate to, or to, just the time to really cultivate like a really solid idea. So we talked a lot over the pandemic, and then we knew that we wanted Sean to have a couple of solo guitar interludes. My idea was to take the Lamabada, which is a very famous Arabic song, and to make that just purely like a guitar thing that sort of connected the Sephardic stuff into the Arab stuff with the Arab Andalusian, and he brought Sufi dance to the table and the Takamitsu, but the vocal music really came from my knowledge of vocal music, and obviously, as I said, Songs from the Chinese was going to be kind of this linchpin of the program itself.
And those songs, the Britain songs, they were originally written for guitar and voice, right? Or
yeah,
okay,
for Peter Pearce and Julian Bream.
Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. What is the Brit? Well, this is an aside, but what is the Britain opera, which is kind of based on Kabuki and
it's not based on it. The staging became like a no staging. It's Curlew River.
Curlew, right?
Yeah, it's one of his three church parables. Amazing piece. Musically, just an incredible piece. I love that piece. Dying to do it. Putting that out there.
I did see a performance of it once upon a time in New York, actually. So
yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. I was getting it mixed up with Noise Flood, which is not pseudo
not no theater, but it is also Britain. I did that when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah, it's Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. So it might be a funny question, but do you feel that the vision of of Broken Branches, how do you think it might be seen differently in light of recent events in the Middle East, or?
Yeah, I don't think it's a weird question at all. Sean and I just finished doing a tour of the program live. We were in LA and at Boston Celebrity Series, Cap UCLA, the new Nimoy Theater in LA, Boston Celebrity Series, and then we ended up at the Phillips Collection, and we have done the program before at Ravinia Festival, before everything that's going on now at the Ravinia Festival and the Schleswig-Holstein Festival, and it's definitely hitting different right now. Obviously, there's always a little bit of volatility in the Middle East. Unfortunately, it's how I've grown up, and I wish it weren't that way. And I think that obviously the people that come to the table don't really want to change anything. So, which is really sad to watch. And I think that keeping all of that in mind, then a program like Broken Branches you sort of see that. And I haven't been historically speaking at our performances, but after the program has been done and we come out and do our encore, this past week I've been saying, and I believe it, like I feel it during the performance. It does feel like this program is speaking to the moment, and because it is about our sameness, even as looking at our otherness, and so much of the program centers around my part of the world, the Middle East, and I think what's moving about it is that the answers really are in exchanging ideas and in sharing and in communing with an audience and communing with people who will listen in a literal way. And we're able to sort of move conversations forward if we gather and if we nurture our community, which I think is what performance can do. And so even we never wanted Broken Branches to be prescriptive. We wanted our audiences and our listeners to take whatever they wanted from the program, even though there's a clear way that we put things together, that the listener gets to decide what they want from it and what they're going to get from it. They can read the program notes and make sense of what we tried to do and the questions we tried to raise, but ultimately the listener takes what the listener wants. And and so I think, even if you're not in the audience to be moved to political action or whatever, I think the importance of a program like this is really to demonstrate that the world is round, and that there's no mile marker of East and West. And when these things happen in the Middle East, and frankly everywhere in the world, that there's a path forward in sitting and listening in good faith. And I think that that's really the answer to all of us becoming better at accepting each other. And I think that so much of the problems that go on over there is a lack of acceptance of the other. It's so binary for so many people, and it's so binary for people that observe so thousands of miles away. It becomes so binary. And when you grow up with that dialogue, I grew up in Hyde Park in Chicago, which is around the University of Chicago. So very free thinking, community that examined the issues of the Middle East with a lot of nuance and a lot of like non-binaryism. And so I think like that's really, sorry, I've been talking for a long time, and you probably want to get to your next next question.
No, I'll keep going.
But I do think that that's, that the program does hit differently because it comes from a place of looking at ourselves, but Sean and I, and looking at how Eastern ethnicities fit into a Western classical narrative, and how we can then reclaim this sort of Orientalism, fetishization, and kind of look at it and lean into it and say, like, it's all good. Like, see, we're all very much the same, despite this kind of othering that goes on. And so I do think that the program then can carry a message, especially now, that we can be better than we're being.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
It's moving in a way.
Yeah. Well, the recording is very moving in many ways. Sure.
Thank you.
Now, I know that in addition to this being a Grammy-nominated recording, the previous Songs of Orpheus was, in fact, a Grammy-winning recording.
Yes.
So, how is the process behind those two recordings different?
How was the process different? Well, Songs of Orpheus was my first album, and it was I don't know if should I say this even. I was kind of harumphing about my career, and I didn't know if I wanted to carry on. It was like one of those moments of like, what am I doing? Which I think so many artists deal with. Like, what is this? What is this career? It's so weird. And I came to a point where I think I was really, truly, if I'm going to be honest, I was at a crossroads of whether or not I was going to continue singing, or if I was going to figure out something else to do. And I knew that before I stopped, if I were to stop, I wanted to put out this recording that I had always wanted to put out, which was a recording of 17th century Italian music, because I love that music. I felt in my bones, I feel in my bones that music for some reason or another. And I didn't want to look back and regret that I had never done it. And so I said, and even if my mother is the only person that listens to the CD, at least I will have done it, And so I gathered up all these resources. I didn't know how to do fundraising. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, but I had to do all of that. And I figured out how to do it and got the recording done. And the programming, the programming was programming is something that I love to do. And so I have lots of programs going on all at once, you know, and so this had been something that had been churning in my mind for a very long time. And I finally just got it done. Um, and the orchestra that I did it with had a relationship with AV Records. And so, and I was going on tour with that orchestra to do Monteverdi's Orfeo. And so I sort of looked at that tour as kind of being this coming to a point basically in my career and saying, if I release this album of this music that I know that I sing well on this tour of like 11 cities where I'm doing a role that I know I sing really well, let's see what happens. And it really was a let's see what happens kind of thing. The disc charts, the disc gets noticed, the disc gets some good reviews, and then the next thing I know, the disc is being nominated for a Grammy. I think there's no way on earth it'll win. No, there was no way on earth it could have gotten nominated, because I didn't have any PR working for me or anything like that you hear are things that kind of go on, but I don't have that. So it was just all very amazing, quite frankly, because I went to the Grammys to go get, you know, to go have a party thinking there's no way on earth that this disc was going to win, and then it won. I'm sorry. And then your question was, the question was, how are the two different? I mean, so that was my first foray into solo recording. I'd done some other recordings before, but they weren't solo albums. And then I put out a Schubert album after that. And so by the time Broken Branches came around, you know, now I'm fully, I think the universe has told me to keep going, by the way. So even though I was at that crossroads of like, maybe I'll stop, obviously like the universe was saying it around Songs of Orpheus, like, no, don't stop, you know, like actually what you're doing is good and people like it, and keep going, and let's see, is basically the message I got. And frankly, a message for lots of people that are struggling, because nobody who's voting or who's listening really knows my story of like, you know, that I put this together, and that it was like a very much a self-generated project. So I mean, you know, hats off to anybody who's willing to kind of just keep doing that, right? And I think like that's a good message for anybody who's at an impasse. And so when Broken Branches came along, when the time for Broken Branches came along, I think like both Sean and I had done several solo albums at that point, and our artistic profiles have been raised at this point. And so I think, you know, it was, and Sean and I get along so well that it was actually a very easy process of programming, and then with Pentatone being able to get things done through Sean's exclusivity with Pentatone, and just kind of them setting up a really, really well-oiled machine for us to kind of just get the CD done.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes dreams do come true.
Yeah.
Not always, but every
Not
now
always.
and then.
I'm well aware.
But every now and then, a dream does come true, and that's part of what makes life worth living.
Yeah, I think so.
So what else do you like to sing? You know, I mean, we were talking about song repertoire and touched on opera and touched on Orfeo. Do you like to do oratorio and opera as well? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I like doing everything as long as, I mean, I think like this was another thing about the impasse that I was at. It was like, it really forced me to look at what it was that I felt like I did best, and what brought me the most joy in the career. Because I think so often musicians are for hire, right? And in a lot of institutions, artists, especially pre-pandemic, I'll say, because I think it's changed post-pandemic, artist-driven projects were very hard to get off the ground. And so we're always for hire, and we're always like sort of at, at a whim of a conductor or a stage director or an administrator that's trying to fit people into what they're doing, like their season or a repertoire that they've chosen. They're doing a Beethoven 9, so they need this quartet of singers. And so I think like all of that impasse that I referenced before was me also looking at what it was that I liked to do and what brought me the most joy. And while I'm more than happy to like join up with an orchestra as a musician for hire, as long as it's a piece that I feel like I do well, I think that, what's become clear is that I need to pursue those things that I really love. And so I love singing Britain. I love singing 17th century Italian music like Monteverdi's operas and frankly Handel's operas, which are a little later. I just did Rodelinda for the first time, and I've been wanting to do Rodelinda for maybe a decade. I really wanted to do that role, and so that was so gratifying to finally get to do that role and to finally explore and to bring to life something that I knew deep down that I could do well. And I love, Haydn's creation is one of my favorite things to sing. So there's a lot, and Berlioz's L'Enfance du Christ. So there's a lot of different genres and periods of music that I really love. But I don't like to pigeonhole myself into one thing. And I think for a lot of years, I was kind of just doing Baroque music. But I've always excelled at doing other things, and so I love doing new music. I love creating. I think like that's really part of it, as long as I feel like I'm really a creative force in what I'm doing. So even when I come to an opera that my thoughts about the character are being heard in the room rather than somebody just telling me how it needs to go, is what becomes much more appealing at this stage for me.
Yeah, sure. That's fascinating. What's coming up next? And in terms of recordings and also performances?
Next up, performance wise, on Sunday I leave for Boston to do Messiah with Boston Baroque. And then I'll be going straight to New York for the Prototype Festival, where I'm creating a role in the world premiere of Mary Communian's Adoration. So that's happening mid to late July. And then there's a project that I'm not allowed to talk about just yet. And then in the middle of that project, I go to New World Symphony to do Britain's Nocturne, which I'm really excited about because Britain's Nocturne is not something that gets done very often. And it's such an amazing piece. And so I'm really looking forward to doing that. And then I'll go, eventually, there are a few other things. And then the season sort of wraps up. I go back to Spoleto Festival to do a world premiere of Lael Shaker's new opera, Ruinous Gods. And Lael actually wrote a piece for me and Sean that's on the album, which is the song that the title comes from. So yeah, that'll be fun. And then recording wise, I get to meet up with my friends at the Kaleidoscope Chamber Collective in London. We're doing a disc of French chamber music for Chandos. And then later down the road, I do David T. Little's monodrama that he wrote for me called What Belongs to You. We're going to be performing that and recording that. And then I have some other stuff churning that I have to get done.
I hope you have some time off too. So
say again.
I hope you have some time off as well. Although maybe you don't like time off.
I do like time off. I think it's a good reminder that I should be taking some. I think like we were all a little traumatized after the pandemic that all of our work kind of dried up. That my immediate reaction was to kind of just start propelling some of these projects forward for myself. And then as work started appearing again, I kind of just started saying yes to everything. I was just like, bring it, because I think I was like in this PTSD of like, what happens if I don't have
Yeah,
any
right.
work? You know,
Yeah.
so I think I'm very busy right now, but it's I need to make a mental note that breaks are good too.
Well, you didn't hear it from me. Right. Well, this has all been absolutely terrific, but I don't want to wrap up prematurely. I want to say if there's anything else you want to talk about with our people that we've only been talking for about a half hour, but we certainly have packed a lot of wonderful things in here.
Sure. I mean, I'm here to answer your questions. So I'm trying to think if there's anything more about the disc you want to talk about. Um, but I know, I mean, we talked a lot about it. So I don't know. If there's anything you want to ask, go for it.
If people want to be in touch with you, do you have aside from the label, do you have management that people could talk to?
Um, I'm between. I'll say that I'm between agents right now. I parted ways with my latest agent recently. Not so recently, actually, 2 years ago. And so I've kind of been going solo, which has been good in a lot of ways because it it it's provided me with the opportunity to really present my ideas to presenters and to say this is what I'm working on. And I think like I've gotten to a point in my career where presenters are willing to have meetings with me, which I think isn't something that a lot of presenters do with younger, less established artists. And so I feel very grateful that they're willing to talk to me directly, you know, and and the benefit of not having that middleman is that I'm presenting the ideas that are mine, you know, and that there isn't nothing's getting lost in translation. So that's good. But having said that, there's a lot of this admin stuff that I wish I had some help with, frankly.
Sure.
But so you can get in touch with me through my website very easily.
Okay.
I have a contact link. Probably shouldn't have given you all that information about the manager stuff, but whatever. It's
No,
okay.
no, it's fascinating. It really is. It's funny about this business of having representation or not, you know. It's
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be learned from not having representation, and from also just like, I think that, when we were younger, when as a young artist, like, I'm talking about like fresh out of school, what they call young artist, because I still feel kind of young, but whatever. But
how
um,
how old are you
I'm
before
not
you?
going to tell you. You all have
Okay,
to
that's
guess.
fine. Okay, don't. I believe
But
I think you're 34, but keep going.
okay, great. So you don't see these little grays that are popping up in my beard now? I have to get rid of those. But I think like when you're fresh out of school, there's a certain way that both schools and the industry has sort of prescribed how things are supposed to go. Like you finish school, you go to a young artist program, you do a bunch of competitions, and then like people will pluck you from either that program or that competition and sort of like build your career, send you out for auditions and all these things. And I think I've been doing a lot of work with students. Like I taught at Eastman last year, and I think like one thing that I think is really important for young people, young singers, young artists to hear is that it's important to cultivate your own path and to figure out early on what it is that you do really well, so that you can bank on that as you go through, and that there isn't one way to make your career happen, and that a career in music can look a lot of different ways. There doesn't have to be this very, binary or like single lane road of how the career ends up going. And so and that's certainly how my career was built. It was not like that. I didn't have a lot of success super young because I wasn't I wasn't one of those singers that could just go to a young artist program and cover Rodolfo in La Boheme. Like it just wasn't my voice. And so I kind of had to find other ways to do what it was that I did well. And so, it took a lot of rejection, and it took a lot of like learning that there were other ways to make your career happen. So I forgot why we started talking about that.
That was great. Actually, I was going to ask if you had any advice for younger singers. So you just,
Yeah, I mean that's it. It really is that, you know, I mean, I always say, because I think about this for myself when I do my own projects now. It's like, is this authentic? Does this feel like it's a true expression of what I want to do, and not something that I'm imposing something that I want it to be? So I think authenticity is super important, and your individuality is important, because ultimately, in your 22 to 28 years, people want you to fit into what they need, you know. But eventually they'll find other people that they need for those things that they can get at a cheaper rate and all of those things. And so I think in those years, it's super important to figure out also not only to be what other people need so that you can put food on the table, but also to figure out what it is that you're going to do after all of that, and what makes you you, so that you can stand out and continue to put food on your table. You know, because ultimately, if you're just doing things the way that it's been done, you're not interesting. You're just mimicking what's been done. And I think, like, to bring it full circle to Broken Branches, Sean and I didn't want to do an album that's been done. We didn't want to do songs from the Chinese with Britain's folk songs and, the Lennox Berkeley piece that's written for tenor and guitar. I forget what it's called right now. I think it might be called Nocturne, but I might have just made that up. But like those discs have been done, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing something that felt like it was ours and that nobody's done, and that did carry a sort of like broader message, whether you want to take that message or not, but a broader message speaking to our world and speaking to our musical community and speaking to a lot of things that pop up in cancel culture, which Sean and I don't believe in, and like all of these things, like, well, can you do things like songs from the Chinese anymore because the translations are so problematic? And it's like, of course you can. They existed in a blip of time where people weren't thinking in the same way. And so now that people are thinking in a different way, let's look at it from that perspective and make it relevant to now and to the conversations that are going on now. And so I think, to get back to your question about what advice do you have, I think those are the answers, right? It's about us bringing our true selves to what we're doing so that they resonate.
Amen. That's a great answer.
Amen.
Well, I think that we've covered some fascinating things. So
Awesome.
I think I should maybe let you go start preparing your turkey or whatever you're going to do.
Now I'm going to the dentist today, so like that's my next.
Well, I hope he gets you back in good eating shape in time for
I hope
Thanksgiving.
so too. I think, I knock on wood, I think they're okay. It's just a cleaning in my X-rays. I'm due for my X-rays, so I think I'll be okay.
I have every confidence that you will. Okay.
Okay.
This has been just terrific. And if there's anything you want to touch base about, please do. And I will do the same.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's been terrific. So I think
All
I
right.
found not only a new tenor to listen to, but a new friend. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a million. Take care.
Okay, talk to you soon, I hope.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.